Hey, everybody. We have special guests on my show, Laurie and Terry. We know each other for a long time, and I'm very glad to bring them on because they're really excellent documentarians. They do work as documentarians. They're also mental health counselors as well. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Leon.
Yes,
Good to
thank
be
you.
here.
Laurie and Terry will be talking about what makes them really fascinated and interested in the future. Because when I talk with them, I really like to hear what they have to share about where they see the future headed and how society could be better so that it could support people's personal growth, it could support people's mental health.
I got fascinated with the future probably 12 or 13 years ago when I came across the Venus Project and the work of Jacques Fresco. He had designed cities of the future and literally had models of them. And he had a whole lot of ideas that I had not thought about before. In particular, ideas about the economy and how the economy was structured and how that impacted our lives. That kind of got us thinking about the situation we were in our life at the time.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things about Jacques because Laurie introduced me to Jacques Fresco, and that's kind of how we got started on the thinking this way. And I was so impressed with, he's an inventor, he's a philosopher about the future. He's a futurist. He had all these inventions like making a dome house which can last a hurricane. That it's just amazing to us that he did these things. And there's other inventions too that are available in our culture that aren't being used because to develop better well-being for people in the future. And that's kind of what we're looking at. How can people be taken care of in the future? Taken care of is not really the right word. How can they get their needs met?
I remember talking to both of you, and you both mentioned to me something I felt was very powerful, is that we have all the resources in the world to take care of people's needs. And as you said, it's not simply about just taking care of people, it's providing people with the environment where they could make the most use of their potential.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
And it's possible to create such a world. So can you tell me, how is that possible?
First of all, there's a lot of things that are kind of in the way of that we notice going on right now in the society and in the world and in the economic system. And so we've been really struggling to figure out, well, how can we get past these barriers to everybody having what they need? Just for example, in the society that we live in, there's so much inequality, and there's so many people who have way too much and so many people who have way too little of the basics of life. And that inequality keeps even those of us who are kind of in the middle, we have a good life, we have enough, so we should be satisfied, right? But we're not. At a psychological level, how can I be fully satisfied when I walk down the street and see these refugees from other countries trying to sell things out of boxes because they need to make a living? They're really trying to make a living in the culture. They're trying to do the right thing. I maybe could buy one thing from them that would give them a few cents for a day. But there's something very wrong that we're not all looking after each other. We don't have that mindset. So our vision of the future, first of all, is that we have a mindset that if everyone's not okay, I'm not okay. So we take that on together. And then part of being okay is being able to pull out the passions of people, find out what they're good at, what they have to contribute. And then the underlying belief behind all of that, sort of the value, is that people want to contribute more than anything else. They want to contribute. And whatever their talents are, that's what we all want to sort of pull out of them so that everyone has that opportunity.
Yeah. And I just wanted to expand a little bit on one of the big blocks that Laurie was talking about. Probably the biggest block is people being able and willing to really listen to people, take what you're saying, what the other person has to offer, to take it in and allow it to be okay. We're so reactive a lot of the times, when people say things right now. When we look into the future, we see a culture where people learn how to work out that reactivity and stay together and do not blame each other. They look at each other as resources for the way life could be better rather than as problems to get past, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So you emphasize the value of having good communication.
Yes.
That's built on being able to build mutual trust.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that look like, being able to communicate well in this manner?
It has to do with being able to operate from the belief that people have something to offer. And rather than reacting to what they say because you don't agree with it, or you think it's different, or you think it's maybe going to put you in danger or something, you would be able to set aside your reactivity and really, really listen until the person you're speaking with says, you got it. That's it. That's what I'm trying to say. And then to take what they've said as a gift, if you combine it with the next person and the next person and the next person, you end up with a much greater whole understanding and maybe even a much better solution to work out things that haven't been going very well.
Yeah. I see, because we all are in the counseling field, there's a lot of power to providing people space to really speak, like to really actively listen to what they have to say. And there's no need to have power or control over them. Like, you don't have to force them to do something or to find a solution. You allow them to come up with that solution by being able to tap into themselves, have that a safe environment where they can really feel comfortable expressing themselves. I remember, Laurie, you shared with me an anecdote about 2 kids or 3 kids working together on a drawing. I think that would be a great thing to share.
Oh, story, yes. I remember the story very well. It was at a school where I worked, and these 3 students in a special ed class were making a rocket ship out of cardboard boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to paint it. And so they were discussing this beforehand. And 2 of them wanted to paint it blue, and 1 of them wanted to paint it red. And they had a very big argument about it. And one of them, who was kind of very stuck in his ways, said, 2 out of 3, majority rules, it's going to be blue, majority rules. And that left out the person who wanted to paint it red. Anyway, I wasn't teaching that class. Somebody else was teaching that class. And I went away. And when I came back later that afternoon, the 3 kids were building this rocket and painting it. And they were painting a red flame on a blue rocket. I said, what happened here? And they said, well, we figured it out so that we could all have what we wanted.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful story, because there's that idea that the majority should always win out. But there's something very enriching, beautiful of bringing everyone's solutions together.
Right. And yeah, exactly. And kind of sticking with it until that's figured out, because you end up with, in that particular case, 3 pretty happy, satisfied kids who had self-confidence and a sense of camaraderie. And you don't get that when majority rules and somebody is left out because they're in the minority.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, another thing I really like about that story is they did it themselves. It's like there wasn't none of the teachers came in and said, well, we're going to do it this way. Why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And, that wasn't present. We find that a lot in today's culture, is that, there's always this other that makes our decisions for us. And that really robs us of that process to really problem solve our own lives in some ways.
Right. So this goes back to the theme that everyone really has a lot of power within. They have something that they could always bring to the table. This goes back to education too. Like, we don't have to try to control kids or make them scared about the future. We just have to bring out what they already have within themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say there's something we've been looking into called co-intelligence also, which happens for kids when they work in groups. And that's happening more and more in schools, hopefully these days, that they work in groups to pool their intelligence instead of competing individually. against each other. The idea that really appeals to us, it's very much what we've been talking about, which is that when you get people together who have different ideas, that's actually a really good thing, because we can see different perspectives and maybe come up with an even better kind of creative solution to problems.
And this takes letting go of the idea that one has the objective truth.
Right.
Is really seeing that your truth is one of many, and you could work with others, that you're going to bring in your strengths, you're going to bring in your truth, but other people will have their truths.
Exactly.
And the beauty comes when you bring the truths together as a whole, rather than you try to control other people with your truth.
Yeah.
Right. Like trying to be right.
Yeah.
Like everybody's right in some way, in their own way.
So let's talk a bit more about the projects that you have been working on.
Well, we made 2 documentaries about healthcare, about how health is financed mostly, because I grew up in Canada, and the United States has a very different kind of healthcare system that's not public care. Essentially, we wanted to bring the notion from what it's like to live in Canada, where you don't think about cost when you're getting healthcare, to people who live in the US, where you're always thinking about cost. It's always in the back of your mind. We call it the jackhammer in the backyard. It's like there's always a jackhammer going on, like making noise in the backyard of your mind of, oh my gosh, how am I going to afford this? What if I get sick? What if, like we have a big medical expense? And it's always there when you live in the US. And if you lived in Canada, it would be absent. And so it's a very gratifying feeling to have everybody have healthcare like you do, instead of everybody's, you're on your own. If you don't have the right insurance, well, that's shame on you, right? So we made 2 documentaries about why the healthcare system in the US is so different than the one in Canada.
Because I work as a therapist myself, it's just so weird if a client is struggling, especially when it comes to they want to find new work, and then suddenly they're off of their current job and they don't have insurance. It's like, okay, so let's touch base when you're working again. Hopefully your insurance matches up.
Yeah, they lose their healthcare. It's associated with their job. And as we've talked about, the job itself is something that we all think we have to have. And what if we had a future where that was structured differently and we didn't actually have to work to make a living and have our health care? What would free us up to be able to explore in terms of developing our talents?
Yeah, we don't have to artificially create scarcity. We don't have to motivate people to survive. We want to have them thrive. And we could do that if we could have that sense of your health needs are taken care of.
Right?
Health. And what if we added to that your housing needs and your food needs and your power, electricity needs and your transportation needs? What if all of that could be mutually taken care of? So then we made another documentary that's more along those lines. We called it The Dream We Choose. And that was based on a lot of our travels and our personal story, investigating how people are trying to step aside from this everyone for themselves economic mentality and create more community-based lifestyles or projects. And so that was the last documentary we made.
We're actually the stars of that movie in some ways. It's our story of when we left Bellevue and moved to New York and kind of changed our lifestyle. Let me just tell you what happened for me in that. And I think can happen for other people. When we discovered that there was other ways of working, other ways of living, other than, going to work every day and buying insurance and having a house payment and having a car payment and kind of putting yourself in debt. And, so when we were able, this isn't true for everyone, so I'm not saying everybody can do this, but we were able to literally pay off our debt and move. And when we paid off our debt, I mean, I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but it is like heaven on earth when you don't have a debt to pay. When we left Bellevue, we literally didn't have a house payment. When we got to New York, we sold our car before we left
the Seattle area.
Seattle. So so that was part of the debt that we dissolved. We didn't have that anymore. And so we had a lot more freedom to do some other things. When we discovered that was true, that we could do that, for me, it was like there's no choice. We have to do that. We just have to, because I didn't think there was a choice. The only way to do it is to go to work every day and spend all your money every month. And, unless you're a millionaire or, you strike it rich. And the story, The Dream We Choose, it has that element in it. Talks about how we did that or why we did that. What we have been searching for since then has been, the kind of future where that could be true, perhaps, for everyone. I mean, why do you have to be retired, not to work for a living? Access to the best things in life, in the best possible world, in an idealistic world, perhaps, should be available for everyone, and we think it's possible to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We have the resources to have that happen for everyone.
I think the thing about the debt, I want to just make a comment on that, because that's such a big element in our whole society and culture, is that everybody's in debt. Not everybody, but
it's a way of life.
It's a way of life. The whole financial system leads us oftentimes into debt, and then we truly are trapped. Even if we're not in debt, we're trapped by the system because we have to keep fulfilling our individual financial needs.
It doesn't mean that people wouldn't work. We're not saying that. We're saying that the job wouldn't be the source of access to everything you need in life, but people would still work and they'd become masters in all kinds of different things, masters of whatever their interest, their best interest was and what the culture needed. People would do those things.
Laurie and Terry, I really appreciate having both of you on. This has been a very enriching conversation. So I have their links down below so you could find their work. It was a pleasure to have both of you on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leon.